Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream are made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Cleveland State University, Robert Conrad, and the Payne Fund.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Say, love to see the big crowd and all the excitement, but we do need to get started. Good afternoon, and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Cecilia Render, Executive Director of the Nordson Corporation Foundation, proud member and sponsor of the Education Series here at the City Club. It is my pleasure to welcome today's speaker, Ohio Superintendent of Public Instruction, Paolo DeMaria. DeMaria. I asked him, and I still did it wrong. According to the annual Quality Counts report by Education Week, Ohio's public education system ranks 23rd out of the 50 states, a significant drop from 2010 when it ranked in 5th in the nation. The report found that Ohio had among the largest gaps on national test scores between students living in poverty and higher income peers. During the same 6-year time period, Ohio's child poverty rate rose to 23%, meaning 1 in 4 children now live in households with incomes below the federal poverty rate. Poverty and other issues related to public education, including teacher pay, student testing and achievement, school choice, and many other issues, often dominate the discourse and the headlines, making the state of America's public education system and Ohio's public schools one of the City Club's most hotly debated topics. And it's why we're pleased to welcome Mr. DeMaria to share his perspective on the challenges and opportunities facing Ohio's public education system. His 30-year career has focused on school finance and promoting higher student achievement, college readiness and completion, and school choice for families. He was unanimously chosen as Ohio Superintendent in 2016. Prior to his appointment, he served in many education and public service roles, including serving as Chief Policy Advisor for Governor Robert Taft and Budget Director for Governor George Voinovich, overseeing charter schools, vouchers, and state report cards for the Ohio Department of Education, and serving the Board of Regents as Executive Vice Chancellor. He says these collective experiences have made him an unabashed leader for Ohio's nearly 3,600 public schools and 1.68 million students. Mr. DeMaria earned his Bachelor's of Arts from Furman University of Greenville, South Carolina, and a Master of Arts in Public Administration from the Ohio State University's John Glenn College of Public Affairs. He has co-authored several publications, including K-12 Higher Education Alignment, an action agenda for increasing student success. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the City Club, please join me in welcoming Paolo DeMaria.
Thanks so very much. It's great to be with you here at the Cleveland City Club. What a true honor it is. Several times I've been in the audience, and I never actually dreamed that I would be up here delivering remarks, and so I really appreciate the invitation, and thank you, Cecilia, for that great introduction. As was mentioned, my name is Paolo DeMaria. I'm the Superintendent of Public Instruction, and I love the fact it's so exciting for me to be here in Cleveland, birthplace of Superman. Superman and I, of course, as you might understand, have a lot in common. Obviously, there's the super parts, right? Superman, superintendent. And then, of course, there are the superpowers. Superman is faster than a speeding bullet. I've had to dodge a lot of bullets. Superman is more powerful than a locomotive. Some people like to think I'm powerful, so there's that. Superman is able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. I work in a tall building, but they make me take the elevator. But we both use our superpowers for good. I want to emphasize that, for good. And there is one little difference. I don't wear tights and a cape, or at least not when I'm in public. Seriously, thanks so much for inviting me here, and I want to recognize a couple of people in the audience. First and foremost, I want to recognize Merle Johnson, my dear friend, recently elected and serving on the State Board of Education that represents this area. I love working with Merle. She always brings great perspective and a can-do attitude to our work. I also want to salute Marsha Maccabee and the Cleveland Urban League and Frank Whitfield with the Lorraine Urban League and the little event they're having after this session. They're partnering with us on some really important work focused on improving principal quality that's supported by the Wallace Foundation. And again, the urban leagues across the state are such great advocates for equity in education and great partners. Thank you so much for your great service. I would call out others, but there are so many in the crowd. But I do want to make special reference and thank David Kolke. As I understand, David, when he was last in Columbus, he saw me riding my bicycle on the street, and he was in his car. And thanks, David, just for not letting your subconscious kick in. But I appreciate that. A couple weeks ago, I celebrated my first anniversary on the job as state superintendent. And when I reach a milestone like that, I usually like to take some time to reflect on what I've learned and think about the future. So as I was preparing for this speech, I figured I'd share some of those observations with you and then talk a little bit about what I see looking ahead. It's been for me such a learning-filled year and so energizing and exciting. I've visited a lot of schools and seen a lot of students and teachers and school leaders in action. And I'm here to tell you, despite what I hear some people say, we have a wonderful education system in this state. Our students are amazing. Our teachers and education staff are fantastic. Our administrators are dedicated and committed, and we have so many incredible partners, as evidenced by the representation in this room, from parents to businesses to communities to philanthropies to social service organizations. And there are so many great things happening. And I'm wowed and awed by all of it. Let me take a few minutes to expand on a couple of these things. Let's start with the students. So amazing. Whether it's the 1,000 students at the Ohio Academy of Science, Ohio Science Day, knocking me over with their sophisticated research projects, or the fine young men that led me through my visit at Cleveland's Ginn Academy, or the students at the Youth Leadership Academy in Canton, who showed me their care room as their school transitions in an effort to bring restorative justice practices. I never cease to be amazed at what students do and what they're capable of. Their creativity, their ability to exceed expectations, their resilience, their good spiritedness. It's clear to me they want to learn. They want to explore and discover. They want to chart the path of their future. They want to lead fulfilling and satisfying lives. And boy, do they push themselves. We often talk about the stress that the system puts on students, but you know what? They put a lot of pressure on themselves. They want to play a sport or two and be in the choir and take a few AP courses and be in the class play and so on and so on. They want to do it all, and God bless them for that excitement and that vigor. And I want you to think about it. If you think about it, it's in their DNA to be that way. Babies are inherently curious. They're soaking up knowledge and information and developing skills at an incredible rate. But we all know too well what can happen and how the conditions in which children live and learn, how they are treated by adults in their lives, and whether they have the social and emotional support they need can impact them tremendously. These things make the difference between that smiling, bright-eyed student joyfully unlocking new knowledge and the one who's angry at the whole world. So yes, I've seen students at their best, but I've also seen students who are downtrodden, demoralized, disconnected, and despairing. And I know it does not have to be that way. As a society, we're learning and understanding more and more all the time about the needs of students and what we can do to support them. Books like The End of Average, Mindset, and even Hillbilly Elegy give us insight into how each child is an individual. And this is really the key to the equity issue, treating each child as an individual and helping them reach their fullest potential. Every child is different, and we have to engage with them that way. Trying to make them the same is not what we should be about. We need to recognize that every one of them can acquire a unique mix of knowledge, skills, and abilities that can equip them to succeed through life's joys and life's challenges, and every one of them can do it differently. They need us to be their cheerleader, but also to be the ones who challenge and support them. And we're finding new ways to do that, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. I also love that students will always be totally honest with you. They will not hold back. We need to amplify their voices more than we do today. That's one of my personal goals for the coming year. I know that Cleveland has been doing student surveys to help them understand school climates for many years now. That's a fantastic thing, and it sets a great example for the way to gain even more student input and involvement in shaping education in the years ahead. So here's lesson number 1 about students. They're amazing, and we have to continually commit ourselves to ensuring that we do our absolute best by every child, by meeting their basic human needs, whether they be physical, social, or emotional, by supporting them in acquiring knowledge and skills, and helping them find their passions that will lead them for the rest of their lives. I'm not saying that this responsibility falls exclusively to schools, but schools, as they have always done in the past, play a key role in creating the conditions needed for students to succeed, and we can do it for every student. Let's move on to teachers and staff. Ohio's fantastic teachers. Every day I get on my knees and I thank God for teachers. I know there are many of you in the room. Stand up and let us celebrate you. The thing that starts at the foundation of every teacher is that they care. They care deeply about their students and will go to great lengths to meet their students' needs. I see teachers who are giving everything they have for their students every day. I'm so envious of teachers because they are making a difference for students. They're changing lives and creating futures, not only for the students, but by creating the futures of individuals, they therefore create the future of our communities, our state, and our nation. Look around you. All of us, we are here today not in spite of the teachers we had, but because of them. They contributed to who we are in a very real and meaningful way, and our gratitude for that should be boundless. There is no more noble and vital profession than that of teaching. The other thing I absolutely love about teachers is that they're always looking for ways to get better. They have a natural disposition for continuous improvement. Just like a champion athlete or musician or entrepreneur, they don't rest after they've achieved victory. The best keep getting better and better and better. They're trying new strategies, they're integrating new technologies in their classrooms, and working with their peers to improve their teaching techniques, both individually and collectively. It's a beautiful thing. A perfect example, from my point of view, is Dustin Weaver, an English teacher at Chillicothe High School in Southern Ohio. Dustin's passion for making learning engaging and positive is one of the many reasons the State Board of Education named him the 2017 Ohio Teacher of the Year. Dustin has a tremendous enthusiasm for the potential of his students and works with them on many levels to make sure they're growing personally and expanding in knowledge and skill in his classroom. He invites his colleagues to critique his videotaped lessons as they work together to hone their teaching skills. Dustin's great, but he's not alone. He simply exemplifies the outstanding work thousands of Ohio teachers are doing every day to make a difference in their students' lives. Teachers are also the engine of the education system. We can never forget that. If we expect to take the system to higher heights and continue the path toward excellence, we can't do it without teachers. And yet so often, we don't take the time to listen to them, understand their point of view, respect their professionalism, and involve them in identifying and designing improvement strategies. So here's lesson number 2. We need to do more to honor, support, celebrate, respect, and listen to teachers. As we design and develop policy, and as we talk about improving practice, teachers have to be at the center of those conversations. If they aren't involved in developing our strategies for improvement, we cannot and will not succeed. They are critical, vital, and fundamental to the success of our education system. Now, let's talk about our dedicated and committed principals and leaders. I've said it before and I'll say it again, excellent leaders are essential to a high-performing education system. It's no different than any other business or industry or organization. Leadership is key. I've had the joy of seeing so many dedicated and committed leaders. They care tremendously, also like teachers, about their students. They also care about their teachers and their staff and include them in key decisions and strategy development. They create a culture that values collaboration, values continuous improvement, values data and feedback, a culture of excellence. When I think back about the inspiring schools that I've visited, there is invariably a great principal in the mix. I was at a conference once, and one of the attendees asked me if I could wave a magic wand and do one thing in the interest of improving education, what would it be? I answered, I'd make sure there was an excellent principal in every school building. Just so you know, Dustin Weaver, who I mentioned earlier, is going to be the principal of this high school this year, and I'm thrilled about that. Like teachers, principals too have this natural tendency to want to get better all the time. It's something we need to support with opportunities for mentoring, quality feedback, and sharing best practices. So here's lesson number 3, excellent leaders are essential, and so we've got to make the development of excellence in school leaders a priority. And finally, I want to talk about all our incredible partners. It's so inspiring, the impact that partnerships are having in so many of our schools. The different types of partnerships are almost too numerous to mention, but let me tackle a few. Parents are a child's first teachers, and the people who love and care for their children the most. Helping students achieve success has to be a partnership with parents. And the best schools are communicating, involving, supporting, and partnering with students' parents to prepare students for success. The other thing that's spreading like wildfire is co-locating health and social service providers right in the schools to meet students' needs for those services. Holzer Health Systems in the Athens, Jackson, Gallipolis area is building a standalone health and wellness center on a school district's campus. It will serve the district's economically disadvantaged students as well as their families and the community. All over our state, we're seeing health and social service organizations working inside schools to help students access dental care, vision care, doctor services, mental health services, and other health and wellness supports, and to ensure that students and their families have access to the whole range of social supports as well. And then we have our wonderful business partners. Over and over, I'm finding strong business and industry partnerships with education. In Northwest Ohio, there's the Auglaize Mercer Business Education Alliance that connects manufacturers like Crown and insurance and financial services companies to schools to help students with career exploration and advising. Companies like Honda of America in Marysville and Pioneer Pipe in Marietta have made themselves valuable players in their local education systems. They're working hand in glove with local high schools to channel interested graduates from the graduation stage right into promising jobs with promising futures at their facilities. When we surveyed businesses and educators last year, we found that more businesses want to be involved in education and more educators want businesses involved. They just don't always know how to make it happen, and we've got to show them how. So here's lesson number 4. We have to continue to catalyze, multiply, and strengthen any and all partnerships that can contribute to the success of our students. And that includes not only businesses and health and social service organizations, but the libraries, the museums, the cultural organizations, and the whole host of other recreational activities, parks, metro parks, and so forth and so on. So vitally important to creating that well-rounded and enriched experience for our students. Helping students succeed is everybody's business. The other key observation I made this past year is that all these powerful forces come together in a school. The students, the teachers, the leaders, the partners. A great school has all these things working in harmony, creating the conditions that make for a joyful learning experience and fill students with hope and confidence. You know a great school the minute you walk into one, don't you? You find a strong visionary leader who's driven by a commitment to team building and best practices. They're not afraid to try new things, but they engage their whole staff to do the research and design their school practices to make sure that what they're implementing will be effective and successful. You see data being used for feedback and to provide insights that drive strategic decisions about instruction, school climate, and student supports. Great schools reflect a culture of excellence, of shared vision and goals, of feedback and continuous improvement. That culture leads to a team that's not afraid to be brutally honest about what's working, what can be better, and what they need help with. You know what they say, culture eats strategy for lunch. At the heart of all this are the teachers and staff, collaborating, involved in the data analysis, involved in identifying the strategies most likely to work, involved in shaping the culture, and committed to doing both the ordinary and the extraordinary. Great schools have student-centered philosophies and structures. They listen to their students. They do everything for the benefit of students. Every program, procedure, and partnership is intentional. That doesn't mean they go easy on students. They have high expectations, but they also understand what students need. They adopt a growth mindset. They're using culturally relevant curriculum. They create a climate that supports positive student behavior and minimizes the need for disciplinary actions. Great schools have significant and powerful community and parent involvement, and they have mutually supported partnerships with businesses and other local organizations, partnerships that advance their vision and goals for their students. A school like I've just described is a beautiful, wonderful thing. We are blessed to have so many of those. You have them here in Cleveland, we have them across the state, and it's not beyond our reach for every school to be that way. So that's what I've seen. Now let's talk a little bit about what it all means. Let's start by setting a little bit of context with the simple observation that the world is changing in very significant and profound ways. Think about it. In a very short time, the entire profession of truck driving will be gone, replaced by autonomous vehicles. Retail is being turned upside down with fewer and fewer jobs. I was in a big chain restaurant recently, and there on the table was this iPad sort of thing. I could order my appetizers, order my meal, pay my bill, and the only person I would ever see would be the server who brought the food. You know what's happening when you see that? Fewer employees in food service. And pretty soon a robot will replace the server, and robots will replace the cooks. What will the jobs of the future look like? What will the economy of the future look like? When you can't predict the future, you come back to fundamentals. And in this case, what's fundamental is this. The more you know, the better prepared you'll be for life. That is, the more knowledge and skills you've acquired, including, above all, the ability to keep learning new things. Let me say that again. The ability to keep learning new things. The more likely you can weather the changes and manage the ambiguity. The research is pretty solid on this front. The more knowledge you have, especially beyond high school, the more you'll earn, the more likely you'll stay employed during a recession, the more likely you'll rebound if you get laid off, the better your health outcomes will be, the less likely you are to suffer depression and suicide or be a victim of the opioid epidemic, the longer you'll live, and on and on. We owe it to each and every child to ensure that they're on track to having the knowledge, skills, and dispositions to succeed in the midst of all this change and uncertainty. And beyond that, we need to make sure they have hope and a belief in their own ability to explore their passions and ambitions. So how do we do that in the education system? How do we take this connected community of a couple thousand entities, traditional public schools, charter schools, private schools, interested public organizations, interested nonprofit organizations, always respectful of everybody's independence, and we join hands on the continuing journey to excellence? The first thing we need is a plan. We've got to stop simply reacting to things and engaging in random acts of policy development. We need something that puts us in a position to be looking forward and being proactive rather than reactive. So we're doing exactly that. We launched a process a couple months ago to put together Ohio's strategic plan for education, a common vision and a set of shared goals and strategies for improving our education system at the state and local levels. This is not going to be a prescriptive top-down kind of thing. Rather, it's going to be practitioners and policymakers coming together in a respectful setting with a reality-based perspective and informed by research and evidence, looking at how together we can effectively drive education improvement. But I want to make a specific point about how we work together. We've got to stop the blaming and the finger pointing. It's absurd. I hear some really smart non-educators say, our schools are broken. Our graduates don't know anything. Then I hear some really smart educators say, our legislators don't care about kids. State policies are punitive and misguided, and it's all wrong. We need to put an end to it. We're doing exactly the thing we try to teach our kids not to do. We're assuming negative intent. We're blaming and shaming, and it has got to stop. I work every day under the belief that every single person who ever touches education policy or practice does so because they want what's best for kids. And I hope all of us come to the table with that same belief. Once we stop the blame game, our discussions need to be respectful, reality-based, and outcome-oriented. It's so easy to say we should get rid of this or that. It's much harder to say how might we find a different way to address the purpose behind this or that. What's the purpose behind state tests? What's the purpose behind graduation requirements? What's the purpose behind the report cards? And be willing to recognize legitimate public interests and come up with alternatives or better ways to be considerate of those legitimate public interests while still effectuating change. That's how we're going to engage in strategic planning. We're going to have 5 focus areas: standards, assessments, and accountability, early learning and literacy, excellent educators and instructional practices, student supports, school climate and culture, and high school success and post-secondary connections. There will be work groups organized around each focus area, and those will have members who are from education, like teachers, school leaders, guidance counselors, but also parents and business and other community stakeholders. We'll have representation from the legislature and the State Board of Education, along with appropriate Department of Education staff and outside experts when we need them. Each work group will use research and data to understand best practices and identify impactful strategies. We'll be gathering lots of stakeholder input throughout the process. And once we have preliminary strategies, we'll give people the opportunity to react and weigh in. Sure, there will be places where we disagree and when we can't find consensus. We'll simply say, here's an area where there's a strong difference of opinion, but we won't let those things stop us. When it's done, I know we'll have something we can join together to support going forward and continue to drive our system toward excellence. I've got to tell you, I'm really excited about this work. One of my visions for the strategic planning process is that we rebalance the focus between policy and practice and really examine practice more than policy. We spend so much time on policy, although I know there are policies in Ohio that still need improvement, and we're committed to working on those. We've made a start on a few of these, and let me recap some of that activity. There's been a lot of angst about high school graduation requirements, and rightfully so. We convened a group to look at this and proposed an alternative for the short term, which has now been adopted by the General Assembly. We've got more work ahead of us in this area, and we're committed to doing that. Our teacher evaluation system has had issues. Last fall, I asked Ohio's Educator Standards Board to review the teacher evaluation system and identify opportunities to improve its effectiveness and address concerns. They came back with some very balanced and thoughtful recommendations, and we've asked Ohio legislators to make statutory changes reflecting those recommendations. We heard loud and clear about the amount of testing, and informed by input from an advisory committee on assessments, I made some recommendations to the state board, which are pending board action. In the meantime, the General Assembly has already eliminated the 4th and 6th grade social studies tests, and I expect there to be more activity on this issue soon. We know there are some issues with our report card system, and we're going to be doing some work to address those. Issues of fairness, issues of usability, issues of scope. At the same time, we need to respect the need for accountability. We'll be spending some time on this as part of the strategic planning process. One small thing we're doing on the 2017 district report cards is that we're going to be including a link on each one to a web page the district will create with information at the district's discretion, highlighting other points of success and accomplishment. We hope this will give parents, community members, and others an even fuller picture of how local schools are doing. So there's more to be done in the policy front. I totally get that. But at the end of the day, we can work on policy until we're blue in the face. Policy never educated a single child. It's how the policy manifests itself in practice. What happens in schools every day that ultimately makes the difference for kids. And to me, the most exciting things in education today are happening in that realm. And that's where we need to focus our attention. And I don't mean telling districts what to do. We know that's never worked. The road to education reform is littered with the bodies of top-down initiatives that are done without anybody's input. We need to facilitate the sharing of multiple proven best practices and let schools choose those that are most likely to drive continuous improvement in their own contexts, for their own students, in their own communities, with their own staffs. Let me highlight a few of the things on the practice front that I think are really exciting. First and foremost, it's amazing what children are able to learn before they even start school. It's almost inconceivable how much learning can take place in those early years. And yet we all know there are many children, by virtue of their circumstances, who simply don't have the exposure to opportunities that can stimulate and maximize that learning. And so when they get to kindergarten, there are unnecessary disparities. Ohio's on the right path in addressing this challenge and recognizing the importance of providing high-quality early learning experiences for preschool children that prepare them for success in kindergarten. The state is making significant investments in this area to give these kids the kind of experiences they may not otherwise get. Similarly, the state's efforts to set quality standards and provide quality practices through the Step Up to Quality system are important to maximizing the impact of these investments. I recently visited a preschool in rural Ohio, Bellevue Elementary School. It was rated 5 stars on the Step Up to Quality scale. I was so impressed with how the children are already developing a sophisticated academic vocabulary. They were naming shapes like sphere, cone, and cylinder. I'm pretty sure I wasn't doing that when I was 4 years old. I also commend and applaud individual communities like Cleveland that are going beyond what the state is doing by using local resources. Pre for CLE is helping so many children and making a real difference in kindergarten readiness. I'm excited that later today I'll be visiting one of the preschools here in Cleveland that's part of Pre for CLE. Your children will be all the better for these efforts and investments. What's exciting about all this is that we're seeing results. We're giving students across the state the start they need as they begin the journey of lifelong learning. That said, I think we all realize we need to continue our commitment to expand and grow early learning opportunities. We've come a long way, but there's more to be done. It's so important for students to be engaged in their learning. School does not have to be boring. School does not have to be boring. Sometimes I hear people say that when students start in kindergarten and first grade, they're so excited, but somehow then we suck the joy out of learning, and we need to figure out a way to stop that. The best teachers make sure that that doesn't happen. We're seeing a number of innovative practices emerging that are designed to get kids more engaged and making school a more personalized and relevant experience. I want to talk about a couple of those. First and foremost, I love project-based learning. I'm sure that there are many of you in here that are experimenting or using in a very deliberate way project-based learning. Every place I've seen it, the kids are excited, the teachers are excited, the parents are excited. Project-based learning says to students, hey, You're not just going to sit in a math class or an English class or a science class. We're going to take on a project. And in the course of doing that project, we're going to build our math skills and our science skills and our English skills and our research skills and our collaboration skills. And you'll see how they all interrelate. Project-based learning is about the real world. And it's happening at more and more schools all the time. In fact, in Mentor, as part of a straight A grant, they created the Paradigm Center for the specific purpose of promoting project-based learning and providing quality professional development about it. Later this month, I'll be attending Ohio's Project-Based Learning Institute, and I can't wait to see all the great things schools are doing. The other way we're making school more engaging is by making more connections between learning and careers. About 3 years ago, Governor Kasich said in his State of the State address, getting kids excited about what the job opportunities are, telling them about what they pay and what it takes to get there, when it's presented in an exciting way, it can capture their imagination. And I tip my hat to the governor for really starting a resurgence of interest and activity in career-focused education. So what have we done? We've mapped out hundreds of career pathways. We're approving in-demand industry credentials that can form the basis of getting a high school diploma. We're giving tools to teachers in all subject areas about ways to make connections to careers in their classrooms. We're collaborating with colleges to make sure students in our career tech programs can earn college credit while still in high school and then easily go on to earn post-secondary degrees. We've worked with the Office of Workforce Transformation and the Department of Job and Family Services to create a place within Ohio's job search engine, Ohio Means Jobs, for students to explore careers and plan for their futures. We're promoting internships and work-based experiences for students to give them a real flavor of life in the workplace. We're seeing career-focused high schools and academies sprout up everywhere, in Akron, in Cincinnati, and Marion. And I don't have to tell you what the story is right here in Cleveland. So much wonderful and exciting work. I love in particular what's happening at the School of Science and Health, right here, located inside the hospital at Mental Health Medical Center. Wow, what a fantastic opportunity for those students. We're also beginning, in the spirit of practice, and very much with the spirit of equity in mind, to think more in terms of meeting the needs of the whole child. Because we recognize that a child needs a positive learning environment and other non-academic supports to achieve academically. Schools are understanding the significant role in a child's life and education of things like hope, joy, and self-efficacy, the belief in one's own ability to succeed. All these play a major role in how a child approaches goals and tasks, both in an educational setting and in life. I salute Cleveland Metropolitan Schools for being a national leader in this area. My first exposure to effective practices in social emotional learning was right here in Cleveland. And the more I see what you're doing, the more impressed I am. I'm a big fan of climate surveys that gauge the whole range of student feelings and perceptions because how students feel matters. We're seeing so many impressive and powerful practices emerging in the area of addressing the needs of the whole child. We're seeing schools using trauma-informed practices for students who are burdened by traumatic conditions in their lives. Schools are using restorative justice practices to address disciplinary problems. In other words, strategies that emphasize forgiveness and betterment rather than punishment and exclusion. We're gaining a better understanding of how physical health and wellness influence a child's ability to learn. As I mentioned earlier, more and more partnerships are developing in schools that are focused on meeting these important needs. We're realizing that we have to be explicit with students in raising their awareness about the dangers of drug abuse and the abuse of prescription medications. The State Start Talking Project supports schools in delivering this important message using simple and impactful approaches. Part of the focus on the whole child includes ensuring that every student has a caring adult in his or her life. One way this is happening is through strong mentoring programs. Thanks to Governor Kasich's vision around mentoring, Ohio funds a program called Community Connectors to connect students with adult volunteers who provide support and care and help students understand the importance of the choices they make about school. Many of these mentors help their students identify personal interests and aptitudes that might lead to a career, and they help guide them in planning for what will come after high school. So that's what I mean by a focus on practices, the things that are happening in schools. And that's what excites me the most. It excites me, too, that all these things and more are already happening in Ohio and are being used successfully in Ohio. The problem is we don't necessarily do a good job of sharing our practices, sharing our successes, and even sharing the challenges of implementation and how we overcome those, and we need to do better. We're working on some ideas to improve how we can better learn from and share all this great activity. One small thing that we started this past year was promoting the hashtag #MyOhioClassroom. We're using social media to allow teachers and students to share the positive things happening in schools and classrooms across the state. We're also working on developing more sophisticated peer-to-peer learning networks and maybe hosting a few symposia or conferences on key topics of emerging interest. I don't ever want to see a case where someone says, I would have tried something different, I just never knew. So bottom line, a focus on practice is what I think ultimately leads to us being able to accomplish what I think is the essential goal, the goal of every school being a great school. That's what our children truly deserve and what will secure their future success and the success of our cities, our state, and our nation. I want to conclude my remarks today by paying tribute to the great things happening right here in education in this great city. You all know I worked for George Voinovich for 8 years, and you can't do that without emerging as a Cleveland cheerleader. And I'm also a cheerleader for Cleveland Metropolitan School District and the Cleveland Plan, and for the great work that Eric Gordon is doing. I attribute to Eric's leadership my understanding of the idea that we need to focus on ensuring every school is an excellent school. There's so much to be proud of, and you know this all better than I do. All the high schools that have career-focused curriculum, engineering, healthcare, information technology, the great work you're doing in the realm of social emotional education, the collaboration between administrators and teachers, the partnering with charter schools, and I want to note the recent recognition that the breakthrough schools are having. John Zitzner is joining us today. John, keep up the great work you're doing. Since the Cleveland Plan, You're seeing results, and since the Cleveland Plan launched, chronic absenteeism is down. Fewer graduates need math or English remediation when they get to college, and the district has shown improvement in all 4 subjects tested in the National Assessment of Educational Progress. I love how Cleveland has been designated as a pre-launch district for the Say Yes to Education project. It's a testament to what you've already accomplished and your continued vision and passion for what education in Cleveland can become. What a great opportunity this will be for this community's children and for ensuring a strong future for the city. In this day and age, the chance for a free college education is a tremendous gift, and yet one that has become almost a necessity. There's so much energy around education and supporting the children of Cleveland. The partnerships you have are so powerful, and the collaboration is so inspiring. You're setting a great example for all of us. Keep up the great work you're doing. Your children are depending on you. Well, I've enjoyed being with you this afternoon, and I look forward to a little bit of question and answer. I hope you agree with me that this is an exciting time for public education in Ohio. I hope you also agree that we have a lot to be proud of in our education system. At the same time, in that spirit of always getting better and better, I hope you agree that we need to keep working together to improve and that we never rest as we strive toward being the best education system in the country. I'm excited about the work ahead, and I hope you are too. Thanks for being here today, and thank you for the incredible commitment you've made to Cleveland's children. Keep up the great work, and let's keep traveling together on that road to excellence for our kids, for our communities, for our state, and for our nation. Thank you very much.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dan Malthrop, Chief Executive here at the City Club. Today we're enjoying a Friday Forum with Paolo DeMaria, Superintendent of Public Instruction in the Ohio Department of Education. Somebody said something about energetic. Yeah, a little bit. We're about to begin the Q&A with all of you. We welcome questions from everyone, City Club members, guests, students. May we have our first question, please?
Hi there. As a third grade teacher in Cleveland Central neighborhood, the third grade reading guarantee has really deeply affected my students and my classroom, everything from the curriculum to the culture of my classroom. So my question for you is about the third grade reading guarantee and what you see as the guarantee's successes so far, as well as the challenges it's faced, and finally what you see it evolving into.
Great, thank you very much for that question. I think as was mentioned, some of my background is in public policy and public administration. And so when the first thing I do with an issue like this, I step back and I look at the statutes and the provisions around the program and say, what was the intentionality here, right? And what were people trying to accomplish? And I think this has become one of the most interesting sort of points of tension and difference of opinion in education public policy, right? Is it more helpful to a student to ensure that they reach a certain level of reading competency before they go to the fourth grade, or or are the harmful effects of retention so overwhelming that it's not better that way? And I think what most people understand is that there's evidence and research on both sides of those issues, with the caveat being that retention is more likely to work if there are the right supports and interventions, not only from the school but also from the parents and other forces around that student's life. So as many of you know, there was a long debate earlier this week at the State Board of Education meeting on exactly this very subject. And I think we also have to I think sometimes people look to the public policy to be so cut and dry. And I think we need to kind of, stay flexible about it, but also ask ourselves, for every student, right, what's in his or her best interest. I also, I always regret when people talk about how a policy has, negatively impacted either their ability as a teacher to be the best they can be, or put made it a less than ideal place to be in that third grade classroom. And I think we owe it to ourselves to keep finding ways where we can try to create harmony between the policy and the practice. In other words, because the end result should be, if you're the absolute best third grade teacher you can be, then you shouldn't feel overwhelmed by the conditions of that third grade reading guarantee policy, and that your kids will benefit and their academic journey will continue in the best way possible for them.
Superintendent DeMaria, I wonder if you have any thoughts about finding the balance between focusing on career preparation for students, preparation for some specific path that is seen, and the need to prepare students for a very uncertain future with multiple careers and careers we don't know about yet.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, because as I made in my comments, there's so much ambiguity around there right now. You see advertisements for truck driving schools, and people rightfully can be attracted because they still pay pretty well. It's a decent. But then you think about the future, and you think about, to me, what's critical is that if the skills that I develop in that program then to have applicability further on, maybe there is value. But I think that's the key, is I see so many kids excited by hands-on learning in those career-based settings. And so knowing that will help them master foundational skills in language and English, foundational skills in mathematics, foundational skills in the kind of 21st century-ish skills of working together, collaborating, working in teams, showing up on those kinds of things, then I know that they have a skill set that extends beyond what might be the preparation they have for that one particular job. So I think the answer to your question is, while it's important that they develop those sort of specific career-oriented job skills, we should not let up on the fact that they also need to be equipped with those language arts skills, with those math skills, with even science skills, social studies skills. I'm a big believer in statistical analysis, because the data stuff is in every occupation anymore. And if we focus on that even if they do end up, being in some career that then changes in the next, 30, 40 years, that they're equipped to take that next step.
So since you gave me a nice shout out, I figure I have to give you a softball question.
I did not do anything special for John here.
No. As a CMSD partnering school, community school, as you know, the funding per child is half to 2/3 of a child that goes to a traditional school, which is really unsustainable. And you mentioned the importance of teachers and paying teachers, which we can't do. So, we're not really sustainable unless something changes. So the question is, Colorado just passed a law that now guarantees that all the money will follow the child, regardless of the type of public school that you go to. And I just wondered, do you support that?
So, John, that's a great question. As you know, I've done a lot of studies in school finance for many, many years. And to me, this is one of always the most interesting concepts, because the irony is that the man on the street or woman on the street perceives that actually more money goes to charter schools than go to traditional public schools, and it's absolutely not true. And in fact, you hear those in the non-charter sector sometimes say, well, more money goes for me to the charter schools than I get from the state, forgetting sometimes that the state also authorizes a broader in my heart and soul, I long for a day where not only there are greater equities in the broader arena of school finance, but that also where there's greater parity, because I think the equities are proven in the charter school sector. At the same time, I think part of that's a cultural thing, because what happens is that we as a community are the ones that have an impact on those kind of realities. And I think the challenge, again, in the interest of full disclosure, I sent my 2 kids, did K-8 in Columbus Public Schools, and an urban district, very much like Cleveland. But they did their high school at a charter school in the Columbus area, the Graham School, and got an excellent education. So I am pretty neutral to the flag that any school waves, as long as it's a high quality school. But I think we as a community have to get past some of those perceptions of difference and what have you, and it's as we move in that direction that I think we can find more answers to the funding disparities.
Hello again. Jeff Wensing. I'm a math teacher in Parma City Schools. I also happen to be the association president. So I just found out yesterday that we did not get our federal grant for our alternative school, which we graduated 40 students from last year. So as you know, there are naysayers about throwing money at the problem, but when you talk about innovation and alternative schools and finding different pathways for the students, that takes money. So now we're in a situation where we may have to look at finding it internally, and that would mean cutting it from somewhere else. So in the grand scheme of things, do you have any ideas, people have been talking about funding for so many years, about the funding of public education?
That's a great, you shaped that question in a very interesting way. You started with a very narrow focus and then gave me the big sort of picture of education finance more generally. Yeah, and to be honest with you, I'm not familiar with the nuances of that particular program's funding. It's a very interesting time in education finance right now. So for a couple of reasons, and I'll go into that. I think the biggest obstacle to education finance reform is the fact that it is not simply an education policy domain, right? Education finance happens to exist at the intersection of, state fiscal policy, economic development policy, education policy, and oddly enough, a little bit of agriculture policy, right? You have all these policy domains, and within each of those domains, you have people, sort of jockeying for, lower taxes or more money for some other issue, or the state's fiscal position, and so forth and so on. So that reality makes it very hard. As you know, in the past, when we've done school funding studies, sometimes the numbers come out and they're so big and they're so overwhelming, and it creates a challenge to the system to sort of say, how do we do that in the context of these other public policy interests that we have? The other thing is that increasingly the education community is being divided into categories. School districts on the guarantee, in other words, those who are not having enough students to actually generate a formula amount that puts them on, and so the state legislature has said, we're going to assure you have a certain amount of money, although it's not driven by the formula, to the ones whose numbers that are driven by the formula are actually kept from getting the full amount they need by virtue of the caps that are put in place, and then that band in the middle that's actually on the formula. So the band in the middle wants the formula to be increased. The band in the guarantee sort of says keep the guarantee in place, even though I know I should be getting less under the formula. And the group that wants the caps lifted says I only get more if the caps go up, so I'm advocating for that. And so what have we done? We've divided the universe, and that makes the progress on fiscal sort of rationality that more challenging. But it's also difficult because you can't design a system that says, okay, well, let's just meet everybody's desires, right? So nobody's mad and make it fiscally sustainable. So it continues to be pernicious. To me, one of the things I say, because that's a very unsatisfying answer that I've just given to you, right? So to the way I sleep at night is that my commitment is, are we using the resources we have to the best of our ability? Are we making the most effective uses of our resources? And I think time and time again, we find little things that could be easily changed that don't necessarily cost more money and that can make a huge difference. Whether it's, because here's a school and they're using trauma-informed practices and really making a difference in children's lives and learning. And here's one that maybe isn't, but it's not a matter of additional resources. It's just a matter of instructional approach or culture within the school. and can we find ways to leverage the resources we have as we continue to kind of long for that time when the financing system can be engineered in a way that makes a lot more sense.
Hi, my name is Jason Williams, and I'm the founder of Get With The Program. You spoke on alignment between schools, businesses, and organizations. That requires collaboration.
Yes. And shared vision.
Yeah. And so, as a stakeholder, what can organizations like Get With The Program do to foster and build trust among partners, as well as hold each other accountable to meet the whole needs of a child?
So fostering and building trust is really, made by sitting across the table and first having good conversations and then showing people, right? Demonstrating what the difference that you're making. And giving, reasons to trust. Sometimes the Department of Education, as you can imagine, has trust issues with the field, right? And so, that's, you don't rebuild that overnight, but one of the things I've been trying to do over the past year is get out there, engage with people, help people understand where I'm coming from, help listen to where they're coming from, and through that process, you begin to build these kinds of trust. So I think that's one part of it. The second part of your question was hold each other accountable. I mean, part of that too comes from that once you achieve that trust is setting mutual expectations for each other, and being a little bit deliberate about that. I think too many times we kind of assume what the expectation is for each other in a relationship, and then when it doesn't pan out, and we say, well, I thought you were going to do this, but nobody ever talked about you doing that, and you thought I was going to do this, and we never, we need to be sometimes put those things more on the table and be more deliberate about it, so we don't leave those conversations with assumptions or vagueness that ultimately makes it feel like, gee, they didn't live up to their part of the bargain, and they might be thinking that about you, and that never works out. So have specific conversations, be precise about what your expectations are, and then it's easier to hold each other accountable because there's clarity.
Mr. DeMaria, I wanted to thank you for coming today, and then as a student, I wanted to ask you that, I know from the time I was little, I was always asked, what do you want to do when you get older?
Yeah.
And as a student, though, being my age, I'm going to be 17 next year, where is my role then in this change to the jobs that don't exist? Because obviously, you guys haven't created them yet, and I haven't created them yet.
You're waiting.
So, what do I want to be when I get older, where am I here? Because I'm not the kids that you're talking about, but
Yep.
I'm not you guys
Right.
where I already have a job.
Where do you go to school?
Mayfield.
Who's your favorite teacher?
Oh boy. I don't know. I don't know. I have a lot of great ones.
All right.
I'm not sure. My English teacher last year, Mrs. Berry, probably had the greatest impact on me.
Excellent, excellent. I hope you thank her.
I do.
All the
every
time,
day.
and all your teachers. So here's the answer to your question. I'm going to start by saying, if someone would have said to me when I was 17 that you're going to be the state superintendent of public instruction for the state of Ohio, having never been in Ohio, I would have first looked confused because I probably wouldn't have known what that was, and said, you're crazy. So sometimes we put too much pressure on students to try to figure out what they're going to do. To me, what I would tell you is, learn everything you can, pursue your passions, and then pursue things that might be just curious to you, right? If you think you'd like to learn how to knit, go out and learn how to knit. If you think you'd like to learn how to do coding and program, go out, because our lives are the accumulation of knowledges and skills that you never know what they're going to do. And then as you look for, as you begin to look for work, so my strategy, what I call it is like sort of destiny-based job searching, right? What does that mean? You sort of look for things that kind of pique your fancy. Hey, that looks really kind of interesting. And you throw an application in the hat and you see what comes out. And the next thing you know, you're doing something. You're working. The other thing I'm big on is go intern with somebody. There are very few people that if you knock on their door and say, I really want to learn what you do here at this business. I'd love to, for 6 weeks, work for you over the summer. I did a couple of those things in my early life, and they were really eye-opening. I didn't go down those paths, but I learned so much about not only those professions, but what it is like to work in a workplace. So do those kind of things. And then your path, you and I will talk 50 years from now, and you'll say, hey, my path looked like this, and it'll be such an interesting unfolding of your future, and you'll have a job that doesn't exist today, but you'll be happy, you'll be fulfilled, and you'll look back and say, boy, it was a really joyful path the way I got there.
Oh, okay. Gabriella Sluss with the Schubert Center from Case Western. Superintendent DeMaria, I so appreciate that you talked about the whole child,
Yep.
that you talk about social emotional and restorative practices and trauma-informed learning. Those are so important. And I hear you about policy and looking at purpose of policy. We are stuck with the zero tolerance policy in this state. However, that continues to push kids into our criminal justice system. And I wonder if you can just share with us your thoughts about how we deal with good practice in light of this challenging policy.
Right. So as my board members are used to me doing from time to time, I try to be careful about the words we use. We're not stuck. We might have in place currently, but we're not stuck with it, right? This is the beauty of having this kind of discourse. And I think there are many people that recognize and would articulate maybe less about the stuck partedness, but the challenges with the zero tolerance policy. But I think we're beginning to make policy movement, right? Things like House Bill 410, things like some of the other things in the right direction. So I think the real secret is not to look at it as a we're stuck with something, but how do we continue to find that balance between the purposes, right? Which is why restorative justice is such a beautiful thing, right? Because, hey, we've all been there. We've all had things that we, that I want to say screw ups. I'll say it. We're on TV, but whatever. We've all made mistakes in our lives, right? And we have two choices when that mistake happens. We can say, you know what? Let's reflect on it. Let's help you improve as you reflect on it, but let's not be punitive about it, or we can be punitive about it. And I think we have to show that those restorative approaches are in fact effective, and I think that contributes to an already existing realization that maybe zero tolerance isn't the right way to go. So be optimistic, be hopeful, be involved in an effort to continue to make progress, and I think that way we will make change, and it'll be better for us and it'll be better for our kids.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we've been enjoying a Friday forum with Paolo DeMaria, Superintendent of Public Instruction in the Ohio Department of Education. Mr. DeMaria appears as part of our series on education innovation, sponsored by the Nordson Corporation Foundation. We're delighted to have Cecilia Render here today. She's Executive Director of that foundation. We appreciate your continued support of our programming here. That brings us to the end of our forum. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being a part of this today. Superintendent, thank you. Our forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream are made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Cleveland State University, Robert Conrad, and the Payne Fund.